Butter, so we can. Oh, Lord, we have to do this again?
Too many controls. I don't think you really need to. Well,
Okay, I will just briefly say, we have called the meeting to order, and I'm repeating this for the sake of the recording, since the recording just started. So the meeting has been called to order at 9:05 a.m. I'm now going to turn it over to Daniela Ibarra so that we can do the roll call for this meeting. Daniela.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So roll call. Blaze Hopkins,
Here.
Emily Block. Sorry, your name wasn't there, Shanti. Daniela Ibarra, I'm here. Adam Sennett.
Here.
Kevin Smith.
Here.
Chris Vaquero.
Here.
Wesley Wright.
Here.
Carolyn Burt.
here.
Reginald Hardwick. Did someone say here, or was that?
No, he's not here.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, thank you, Daniela. Now we are going to move to approval of the minutes. We have a couple of different meeting minutes that we need to approve. So we are going to entertain a motion to, I'm actually going to do this in bulk if we could, unless anyone has any hesitation about us doing that. I would like to just kind of approve these in bulk. So if we can have a motion to approve the September 7th, the October 1st, and the January 13th board meeting minutes. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the September 7th, October 1st, and January 13th meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Okay, on to the president's report. I'm gonna keep this pretty tight. I think, as I mentioned in my previous meeting, I'd like to make sure that these meetings are about an hour long. I know a lot of you have a baseball game to get to, and I want to honor that. There's a couple of items that I do want to go over, just so that everybody is kind of on the same page and up to date about the latest developments that have been happening with the organization. Our SPJ executive director search is complete at this point in time. And to just kind of give you a background again about how we got to this point, the search committee started its work back in October of last year. We used our networks as a search committee, the networks of both the SPJ and SPJ Foundation board, as well as the networks of some members at large to identify a list of potential candidates. We then narrowed that to a short list of 5 candidates. We conducted first round interviews and then narrowed that list to 3 finalists. Final interviews took place in DC on March 22nd. The search committee was unanimous in its final candidate suggestion to the SPJ board, which we will consider today during our executive session. And every candidate, I will say, was very strong for very different reasons. And the search committee really came to the decision about this final candidate suggestion based on what we determined SPJ's needs are for this given time. We will share more once the SPJ board has a chance to consider that suggestion and potentially vote for it in executive session. So please stay tuned for more information about that. To the 2024 budget. I'm not going to go over this in huge detail because we do have a treasurer's report as well as an executive director's report. But there were a few substantial changes to our budget, and you will hear more of those in detail in that treasurer's report. But I did want to update you on a couple of different things. So the final numbers from the 2023 SPJ convention did come out. There was a loss of $114,000 from that convention. And we also lost our Google grant, and that was $60,000. So that was a $60K hit to the 2024 budget. And we'll talk a little bit more about that once we get to the treasurer's report. I think that given that we lost $114,000 from the last convention, I think that kind of further identifies that it was a good decision to have skipped the 2024 convention, just so that we could have an opportunity to really look at more cost-effective ways of holding the annual conventions. Obviously, we are already locked in for 2025 with the Associated Collegiate Press and the College Media Association, again, for MediaFest 25. I think because we have 2 partners, I think that, that will be financially successful. But I think after that, especially once we get a new executive director, and we really need to determine what is a better way for us to approach having conventions if we're going to have them, so that we are not losing 5 figures, 6 figures. That's not sustainable. And so, I will say the candidate that we have suggested did have some ideas on how we could kind of balance that, and, make that a money maker again. The nominations committee, there is a preliminary report in the board packet, and I really encourage everyone to read it, so that you're very read in on what the nominations committee is doing at this point. The exact dates of the 2024 election will be confirmed by April 15th, so that's in a couple of weeks. And there will also be a greater focus by the nominations committee on the RC positions that are open, including holding a dedicated virtual info session just for that particular position. So I would say keep an eye open for the virtual events that they will be having, for all of the openings of the candidate positions, for 2024. But specifically for the RC position, because I think that that is a position historically that we have had a bit of trouble with recruiting, and even retaining. I did want to do a final kind of shout out for the regional conferences that we have coming up. Region 1 has their conference from April 19th to 20th at Emerson College in Boston. Region 2 has their conference on April 13th at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. Region 4 and 5, their conference is April 12th to the 13th at Northern Kentucky University in Highland Heights, Kentucky. Region 6 is actually happening as we speak, started yesterday, and will run through today at the Graduate Hotel in Minneapolis. Region 9 has their conference on April 13th at the South Lake Community Center in South Lake, Utah. And Region 10 has their conference on the same day, April 13th, at the Seattle Times in Seattle, Washington. And that concludes my president's report. I would like to turn it over to Jennifer for her interim executive director's report. Jennifer.
Thank you, Ashanti. I will also keep this really brief, and if any of you have questions, follow-up questions or anything, go ahead and feel free to ask those later. Sorry, I'm admitting people to the meeting. Okay, just really quick. The awards program, the judges are judging for the FDX awards right now. We had a lot of, good submissions. The revenue came in a little under what we projected for the budget. And we're gonna, once the judging is complete, we're gonna do a deep dive to see, what categories did well, what are some things we may need to tweak for next year, to keep that awards revenue up. Membership, Crystal reported to me just this week that she did a mailing, in the last week to members who had lapsed, and she's getting a lot of people renewing, who weren't aware that they had lapsed because they didn't receive any communication from us in the last year or so. So, that's good news. She said the membership number is going up. You'll hear from Lucas shortly about development, and that report I just added to the board folder. It's the same report that the foundation board's going to hear tomorrow. So you'll hear from him. And then communications, they did they completed a successful Sunshine Week with all of the partner organizations. They're gearing up for Ethics Week. Fred knows all about that. They're working with the committee to promote webinars and things that the ethics committee is putting together, working also with Rod Hicks on that. And they are promoting some Ethics Week t-shirts in the SPJ shop online. They look pretty cool, so check that out. They also did a really cool, I think, because I'm into this stuff, eclipse themed t-shirt that's in the shop. And they were able to tie it into journalism, and so it looks pretty cool too. So take a look at that. Buy one for all your friends. They are also, Kim and Nadia are working on a plan to get us back on TikTok. We were on for a while. We only used it really at conventions because it made the most sense when we were in person. But they've got some good ideas for just putting some short informational videos on TikTok to try to reach a different and maybe younger audience. So that is something to look forward to. And then just they're evaluating all of our social media accounts and just the traffic and engagement. LinkedIn continues to be where we see the most growth. So they are taking a look at that and developing a plan to maybe expand that audience even more. I am just continuing to do a lot of things, but working with YPTC still to streamline things, move things to electronic. I want to say thanks to all the RCs who responded very quickly to the email we sent out regarding getting them their regional conference funding. So they were great to work with on that. And I think a lot of the regions have received their money already. So hopefully they can put that to great use for their conferences. And that really about covers it for me. So thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. All right, I would like to move to item number 6, which is the Finance Committee report.
Can I ask Jennifer?
Yes, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Can you be more specific about what our membership numbers are?
Yes, they recently had dropped right under 5,000. I think I could look it up. The number Crystal gave me this week, I believe, was 4,900. I'll send the exact numbers to you.
Any other board members have questions for Jennifer? Okay, we will move ahead then for item number 6, which is the Finance Committee report. Daniela, turning it over to you.
Yeah, hey, good morning, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there in Chicago with you all, but the eclipse made everything expensive. So in the board packet, you can see the past 2 reports for the monthly finances. I know the financial committee, we've checked in every month and have been very critical of, you know, all the numbers and going through everything. And I think we've done a good job of analyzing everything. So I just want to go ahead and jump to the February one, since that's the most recent one. And if you want to read, and Ashanti, if you want to go back to the January one, we can. But I think since the February one's more recent, so it shows that, you know, we have a change in assets. We're up 208,000, like Ashanti and Jennifer mentioned. We got some money from the awards, not as much as we had projected. And it also mentions the Google grant that we didn't get, but I don't believe it's reflected in here, Ashanti, right? Like, we're gonna get a new budget that we're gonna have to reapprove.
No. We're not going to reapprove the budget because that's not how budgets work. So what we're going to do is YPTC is going to make a note in the actuals column, and then next to that, make a note that there had been a significant change in losing that Google funding. But we're going to keep the budget that we adopted.
Sorry, I meant modify.
Yes, modify.
Yeah, so we sorry, I'm going over my notes here. So it talks about our budgets, the modifications that we have to make. And that's pretty much like the Cliff Notes version. Ashanti, am I missing anything big? Because I don't know, we've gone over these a couple of times, so I don't know what I'm missing.
Yeah, no, I did want to at least have a conversation and at least share information about losing the Google grant. So that was $60,000 that was included in our 2024 budget. And so I wanted to be clear with a hit like that we're being transparent about the fact that we did lose that grant. I will also say that we have now kind of put in place that a standard is if we are asking any organization for money, that a proposal needs to be submitted, whether they are asking for it or not. I'm not sure if that's one of the reasons why we may have lost that Google grant, but I'm sure it did not help. So I just want to make sure that everybody's really clear that that was a significant hit to our budget. And we are hoping that that's not something that happens in the future. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have from the board about that particular hit to the budget.
That money was earmarked for something specific, right?
The
60,000, yeah.
When you say earmarked, do you mean, did we have a specific plan in place for it in a budget?
So it was free money
No, it was for the Google training program.
for the Google
Yes,
training.
yeah.
So, okay, so then we're out to Google training.
We are.
Right. But that money was dedicated specifically to Google.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
I have
you.
a quick question.
Yes, go ahead, Adam.
Those Google trainings, those were like for specific, the like rural trainings in newsrooms, right? It wasn't, okay. How many did we do of those last year? Do you know? No worries if you don't know, I'm just,
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but we did meet the milestones that Google set for us. We did a lot of trainings. We have a lot of really great Google trainers that are willing to go all over the country, although this particular time, the focus was on the South, newsrooms in the South. So, yeah, we met every milestone along the way. We did have some funds left over, so, that isn't earmarked for anything at this point because the contract is up, but yeah, I can get you the exact number.
oh, thank you.
Emily, did you have your hand up? No? Okay, I
No,
thought
I'm
I saw your hand. Unfortunately, we are only entertaining comments and questions from the board at this moment, but public comment, go crazy. Okay. Okay, I would like to move forward with a subsection. Daniela, was your report complete?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I want to move on to subsection C under item 6, which is the revenue discussion. Patty Gallagher Newberry, who is a member of the SPJ Foundation Board, but also a member of the SPJ Finance Committee, has drafted a quite thorough memo that I would like her to briefly take us through, so that we could potentially open up a pithy conversation about potential revenue.
Thank you, Ashad,
Yes.
and thank you for welcoming me into the board meeting today. For folks who haven't had a chance to look at the the memo, let me give you just a brief overview. I've been part of the finance committee for a long time, going back to, I think, 2000, maybe 17 or 18. And I've been a member of that committee consistently with the exception of 1 year. And so as we have been working our way through these meetings, the finance committee meetings, the constant call and agreement is that we need more revenue, which is, that's pretty understandable, and all organizations need more revenue. But our most significant sources of revenue have fallen consistently over the years. Membership down, this year, convention event dollars coming in. Awards have remained pretty consistent, which is great. But if you look from, again, in my memo, from fiscal year 18 until today, our total revenue was 1.2 million back at the end of the fiscal 18 year, and is about half of that now at 575. So if the solution is let's raise more revenue, how do we act on that, right? We brought in Lucas, that's great. We have a fundraiser now working with us, wonderful. But I think it really would behoove us to dig deeper, consider the revenue sources that have declined, whether there is potential to return to previous levels or at least regain some of what was lost. And take a look at our peer organizations, where are they getting revenue that maybe we have stopped chasing. I just think it's time to dig in deeper and look at what are the possibilities on revenue. Now, if this was an easy question, we would already have the answers. It's not, right? But instead of just having a monthly meeting where we say, we need more revenue, let's really dig down and analyze where we've been, where we are, and how we might get an improved revenue picture. So that's what this is all about. I spelled out bulleted form, the trend line in each of our categories, and then also noted, some of our other key financial items are also, mostly in distress, with a couple of happy bits in there, including the fact that Jennifer identified $270,000 in federal dollars that will be coming our way. So the end of my memo here, I'm requesting that we put together something. I'm calling it a revenue task force. It can go by any name, to work with our incoming executive director, to work with Lucas, and to dig in, as I say, analyze the situation in more depth and come forward with some recommendations about things that might be helpful to move the needle on revenue. Thank you.
Patty, I just want to, just thank you for being proactive and putting this together and, with a very discerning eye. Because I think that this is a good idea to consider, especially as we have this new executive director coming in. Because I think they too have some really solid ideas of how we can increase some revenue streams in some areas that, we haven't necessarily gone after in the recent past. So I appreciate your thoughtfulness on this. Any questions from?
I would just make one final point.
Yes, please.
I do think, we loosely agree that boards should be helpful in revenue production, but we haven't actually been tasked to do that. And so I think that could be part of that conversation or task force. And one of the reasons I thought it's necessary to start with at least this minimal amount of information is because I think time goes on, we forget where we've been and how much our revenue has fallen off in a short amount of time. So just wanted everybody to kind of have that at the top of mind as we start down this road. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions from the board about what Patty has shared?
I do have a
Yes.
question. This is a procedural question that I'm trying to figure out. So obviously, we're clearly understand that we're facing, budget deficits. We brought on a developer, and so can you tell us how much you've raised so far for us?
Yeah,
Yeah.
can I pause that? Because we have a development report
Okay.
coming, the
All right,
next
well,
item. So is it
Oh,
okay
yeah,
if
I
we
will-
pause for that?
Yeah, but,
Okay.
whatever that amount is that you report on, so my procedural question is, you're raising the money, and where is that money going? Let's say, for instance, and I don't know what you report, let's say you raised $100,000. Is that $100,000 being sent to the foundation? Do you get that money? And then when you get that money, are you parceling it to SPJ for our budget? Or is that money going directly into SPJ's operating accounts? That's what I'm trying to figure out, what the procedure is for that. And if that's a question, if we can answer that when you give your report, that's perfectly fine, but I'm just trying to figure out how the process works.
Yeah, if you can you kind of write that down
Yeah.
and include that in what you're gonna say, because I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
kind of insulate that. Did you have any additional questions?
I do not.
Okay, anyone else on the board have questions for Patty? Okay, thank you so much, Patty, again. In the spirit of what Kevin just asked, perfect segue, we're now going to move to Lucas Metropolis, with his development report. So Lucas, I will pass it on to you.
All right, well, first of all, great to be here, good to see you all in person. I always love during board meetings when everyone says development, and then eventually it's my turn. So, two things, obviously I had a chance to meet with you all at convention for the first time, only being on for a few days, and then virtually. I have a few observations. Jennifer dropped the development report in the Dropbox, so you can take a look at that. There's a few updates since that was done. But observation wise, since I say back in the convention, there was a push initially saying, one, looking at your number of active donors, beyond members, active donors pretty low. So the end of the calendar year was a very general push, simply just to get participation. And part of it was to see a bit of a test to see would people respond just to give to SPJ because they believe in it. And we had over 130, 140 folks simply just give to give and say, we love SPJ, which was great. And that was rallying some of the internal base. Coming to the new year, started to look more externally. I looked at some foundations, I looked at some companies, still looked at some individual philanthropists. I will say a common theme I was confronted with multiple times was more so kind of SPJ being very general and then wanting more specific, but at the same time, the specificity they wanted, it was kind of from internally, I'd say you have a foundation board, you have SPJ, there was a lot of projects that happened or that are brought up saying, we should do this, we should do that. And I think and I've already talked to Nikki and Ashanti about this, but coming together with the new ED as well, and really shaping out not only all these great projects, but what are the funding priorities? Obviously, we can say you want to raise more money, you want to bring more revenue for SPJ as a whole. For many funders, that doesn't always bode well. It has to be something tied to a bit of something a little more sexy. You know, what is that project that you might need to then support some staff members? So that was just more of an observation from looking at the funding side of, you know, let's just go out and raise more money. You know, actually engaging people beyond just SPJ, that is, it will always remain an obstacle. But with that being said, also looking into the new year, one thing I noticed was speaking to a few chapters that there's all these chapters that are raising money and often going to the same people that we're saying we should go to raise money for SPJ or the SPJ Foundation as a whole. And so what I've noticed is that kind of sometimes haphazard asking of 1 year we're doing an awards event. Let's go ask, you know, this billionaire for 10K. Another year saying, oh, you know, someone else is there saying, has anyone ever asked them before? I'm gonna just write them on LinkedIn anyways. And so what I've seen, and this is not atypical, but I've seen a lot of these great relationships that we should have that are often fragmented with multiple different people attempting to try to get funding from them. At the same time that I've also seen at the chapter level, a little bit of burnout of folks saying like, I don't fundraise, I don't know how to, but now my committee is saying, go raise money. And so that was interesting to me, and I did put kind of a bit of a bottom-up fundraising model. There's nothing radical in there really. It's just another way to look at fundraising. When you look at it from SPJ's lens, national, you're looking down. And a lot of times these groups, they want to do more local. Now there's some companies, for example, that are in multiple locations, but in order to actually get them and, you know, get them to consider the entity of SPJ, what I would propose, and I've talked to more so some folks in Region 1 as just a starting point, just a test case. And I will say, like, even hearing from a few chapters there saying like, oh my gosh, it would be so great, like folks that are having the deadline that are coming up. You know, they were talking about fundraising for sponsorships and how it's kind of each year, like, yeah, let's just go after some companies. And then they've also had some that burn out, and they've also had some chapters that look to create their own foundations. Because for whatever reason, whether it's, a lot of it's just saying, oh, we just wanted to be able to give someone a tax deduction. And so that's still a conversation, but talking with the foundation, SPJ, trying to find, I would say, an easier way for a development person that's trying to be helpful in bringing more revenue to utilize all these great relationships that are scattered across the country, to have them help get in these relationships and use them as these ambassadors to then say, oh, great, you're going to sponsor the deadline dinner. That's wonderful. You know, we're trying to do more with an ethics program on a national level. We know that's something you care about. Could we talk about that? Could we submit a grant proposal? And so trying to look at now, I think that's a huge opportunity. I know, I'm sure that's been attempted to a degree in the past, the idea of let's mobilize the chapters. But I'd say having someone who can actually coordinate that, manage the relationship. We have a donor management system now. For example, you talked about, Kevin, you talked about process. I'm still working that piece out, but you know, we have the ability to create a bunch of different fundraising pages. And I've heard that some of these chapters will do their own fundraising and not offer tax deduction, or just not really keep track of who's participating when. And in the fundraiser's mind, not being able to steward people, not being able to cultivate, not be able to grow that relationship is usually a no-no. So in terms of cash raised, since, you know, really since the late fall, we've had about close to about 170 donations. And that this number is wrong now because we just got a $500 gift in the past 24 hours. Yay. But it's closer to between 35 to 40K about. Now that's not counting. We have a donor right now who's considering a $15,000 gift. And then we just got word of actually two other planned gifts, one for about 30,000 and then one for 300,000. That was just submitted to us. And that's another big opportunity. Obviously, this foundation has grown tremendously off planned giving. And so you might have seen the email newsletter type announcement that went out for Mike Callender. That was just an example of someone who recently, thank you to Pete for helping with that relationship. But that was just a recent kind of showcase of trying to, so you have so many members, so many people who have been members forever that care deeply for SPJ. And so that's another thing as we look at the present, also really trying to mobilize for the future. But that's my biggest thing right now has been, we are going to be doing a push for Ethics Week coming up. So I wish this was a few weeks later. We're going to do a little push. And again, that's more so trying to rally folks again, really to raise the big dollars. We've got to look external, but at the same time, we've got to have more of a, I'd say, a local approach up to do that. And we've also got to have the priorities aligned with really what we want to focus on. And it can't just be general, like we just want more cash for SPJ. It's gotta be creative with us looking at our budget and saying, how can we tie that in? And also what funding is available. Because it's great when we say we want to do this or that, but are there funders out there who also want to do that? And is there a reasonable chance of success? Otherwise, let's not start a project that we don't think can be fully funded, operational, report back. Jesse, I don't know, Jesse, if there's anything else that missed me? Yeah, a bit of a spring push. But I will say, Patty said, you know, at the board level, you guys have two great boards, ton of committees. So really, as we look, even with these smaller pushes, like the end of the year campaign, but really this ethics push that we're gonna do, the little spring campaign, like, I would encourage all of you. We all have networks, we all have peers. Encourage, you know, you all to be sharing that, building that base. And I will say, when we did the end of the year mailer, we did get a lot of messages back. We were asking for donations, but we had a lot of membership people right back and saying, hey, you know, and we had some interesting ones, but you know, we had some members with issues or comments like, hey, I was a member for 30 years. I stopped, you know, can someone call me to tell me current update? And Jennifer called them and many of them came back. Kevin, your question on process, which I didn't get to yet. That I don't deal as much on the back end with exactly the process of the process we had discussed. There are certain cash that we raise that is unrestricted. And then there's some that was not tax deductible. So there's different funds. And so I know the money right now is coming through the foundation. And then I don't know if you guys have more process. I don't touch the process. I just raise the money.
Yeah, you know, when things are unrestricted, the accountants put it through the foundation so people can get that tax deduction. We're still working out and trying to figure out on the back end, like how, you know, how do the two how does the foundation, how does SPJ want to work together to kind of divvy up that money? Keeping in mind though, that the foundation does give a quarterly reimbursement to SPJ for things like their, portion of salaries and overhead, which we don't have that much of, but, you know, there's payroll taxes, there's 401k match, all that stuff. So, and then for gifts that are restricted, you know, if it's for legal defense fund or First Amendment forever fund, right now, those go directly to SPJ and aren't tax deductible. So, you know, I think there's still some conversations that we need to have just about what is the exact process that we want to put into place to, you know, make that fair.
Especially as we raise bigger money,
Yeah.
right? Like, so if SPJ is leading the project, you know, how do we want to handle it? We want to find a way where we can offer people tax deductions, or especially when you talk about grants. Like if we're going to some groups, like, oh, well, you know, we're gonna run this through SPJ, they're like, we need to run it through a 501c3. We can't grant straight to you. Many will say that.
Yeah.
If
I may add,
please.
we have within the foundation restricted funds that have been brought in. And so they're tax deductible, they were made to the foundation, but they're restricted for particular items. And there's no reason why, as we get grants or donors to come in, that they can't say, hey, I want this to fund this particular thing that an SPJ uses that money and it is held outside of the normal 4.5% or whatever percent it is. There's no reason why you can't get the tax deductibility and have that money fund directly something that SPJ will administer. So there's a way to do this and get, you know, the donors happy with the tax deductibility and SPJ happy with, hey, this money is going just for whatever program or initiative. There's a way to do it.
Question, I know some people, yes, they give for specific reasons and that money then becomes restricted because it's tied to either, you know, a specific fund that we have or the foundation in general. When we have funds that are less restricted, you know, people are just giving to the organization. I think we need to have a conversation of what that looks like as far as where that money goes, right? Does that money go to the mission fund? If it's gonna be completely unrestricted, it's just people giving money. You know, do we need to have a conversation about if it's not restricted, where is the largest need that we have to benefit the overall organization?
I guess
Yeah,
that's,
'cause the mission fund, I think, was created for people who wanted to give to SPJ.
Right.
To help like just with operating expenses and
Right.
things, but they don't get a tax.
No, but
deduction.
I guess that's what I'm saying. If we are getting unrestricted funds that's run through the foundation, that's not connected to specifically the foundation, that's not connected to the First Amendment Forever Fund or the Legal Defense Fund, can we then pass that through to
I'm not sure.
that, like that,
I'm not
that,
sure if that would be.
like, I guess that's my question is.
Well, you,
Yeah.
you all,
Right, exactly.
but you already make disbursements to SPJ, correct? Like you're already giving thousands.
Yes.
Maybe.
But that is, you know, that's the agreement, right? That's gonna come whether we get funding or not,
Yeah.
like if we get people giving unrestricted funds or not. When we have money on top of that, I think that's the question that Kevin is getting to, is
Yeah.
that if we're having restricted funds come in, even if it's funneled through the foundation, how are we making the determination about where those funds end up, right? Is it going to end up on top of what we have, you know, the relationship and the understanding that the foundation pays for 50% of some of these salaries? Once that's covered and there's another pot of unrestricted funds, how do we determine where that money
Well,
goes?
I mean, the amount that the foundation kicks to SPJ is supposed to cover more than just salaries and, I mean, there's an overage, or there has been in the past, a big overage, and that is the support that comes from the unrestricted money. So I would guess that as money comes, if it's unrestricted, it's going into that fund.
Right,
And that's how legally it is set up.
right,
So that's why I think that as we get new monies in, we really need to put them more into a restricted fund. So that is you get that on top of the unrestricted. It will generate more money for SPJ to do things. I just think that financially, it has to be structured that way to be legal. You know, according to 501c.
Yeah, that's up to you all if you decide if it's like on top of what you already do, or is it part of it?
well,
That-
I'm gonna play devil's advocate here for a moment because I see that as being more problematic. I mean, we're looking at our budget. Patty just gave us some details. We've seen the budget. I mean, we need money for operating expenses. And anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the solutions for bridging our gap was we were going to hire somebody to do fundraising. Now, it's my understanding that the fundraising was going to help us cover some of these expenses. So when I ask him, okay, so you're getting $100,000 and that money gets passed through to the foundation. When our operating budget, when we lost $114,000 from the convention, and we're having to think about laying off people and doing all these other kinds of things, we need money just to keep the lights on at this point. It doesn't help us to put that money into restricted programs and say, okay, in order to spend that money, you have to do more ethics committee things, or you have to do, these projects, because it's earmarked directly for that. I think what's often going to happen is we're going to find ourselves, and you alluded to this, we're going to find ourselves doing projects just to satisfy donor donations. And that may take us away from our general mission statement and make it difficult for us to keep lights on. I look at the budget and I see this big gaping hole, and you're telling me we're bringing in money, but that money isn't really going to what we want it to go to, or what we needed.
Can I clarify something here? If it goes through the foundation, it has to be for one of the purposes that education, research, training, things like that.
Okay.
It can't, money from the foundation can't be used for most general operating expenses. So if it's funneled through the foundation, it can't come to SPJ to keep the lights on.
And you're just supporting what's my
Right, so
concern.
what the issue may be is that the foundation picks up some of the things that it can for SPJ so that SPJ can use existing other money to pay to keep the lights on. But So, you know, it just when it can't be used for SPJ lobbies, it can't be used for that, it can't be used just to pay salaries as a general
And I
proposition.
think that goes to what Ashanti has said, where we need to have a conversation.
Right, and I guess that's what I'm saying, like, I think once we have our new executive director come in, and I'm being very optimistic and hopeful in this statement. Once we start bringing in additional funding, I do think a new conversation needs to happen about what that looks like in terms of, you know, how can we shift, you know, some of the foundation's contributions so that some of the funding can then, that we have on hand for the society side, can be used for operating expenses, so that we are still doing this above board and we're still legal, right? So what I'm saying is, another conversation as revenues increase likely needs to happen, right?
We can
You know.
continue to have conversations.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, as I said, the foundation's only allowed to fund certain things. So we've tried to be creative.
Yes.
To be as helpful as possible, but there are gonna be some things we're never gonna be able
Oh,
to do.
exactly.
And so, you know, but my feeling is that the amount that has come, that the foundation has given SPJ through even just the unrestricted should be able to cover the lights and all that. It should be able to do it. The reason that SPJ is an issue right now is because of some losses that were unanticipated. But the foundation can't do anything about that. SPJ has to manage its budget,
That's fair.
Yeah,
you know, yeah.
yeah.
That's completely fair.
Any questions from the board specifically, to Lucas on the report that he just gave?
Thanks for everything you've done.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear about the $300,000.
Yeah. We need someone
Let's
else
run the
away.
ride.
Hopefully. But I will say, like, this is a great conversation. We talked a bit about the profits, and it's not as big a problem until you raise more.
Yeah.
And so as you start breaking past the 100K route, as we go after serious money, you're gonna need to have that conversation. And I know you all, I mean, I'm the hired gun to help with bringing money, but I need you all to help think through the process of what's the best way internally that would benefit the budgets. But yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions.
I have to say, I'm impressed. Not just with what you've done so far, but the approach you've taken. And how you're, you know, looking under every rock and really trying to help change the mentality of SPJ as an organization in terms of supporting ourselves financially. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think the mentality is what has hurt you all a good amount, to be honest. Like there is money out there. There are people that like and appreciate what you did, especially the longevity piece. And especially even I was talking to Chris Roberts the other day, and we were talking a lot about ethics and, you know, coming up on maybe the 100th anniversary with the ethics code. Like there is a big opportunity, but the organizations have to come together and think through the next few years. Like, what is that case for support? What does that look like, and how does that trickle down? And then use someone like me to then channel that and go after the funding sources and work with you all to, you know, as Patty said, to mobilize the board, give tasks, and to whoever can be helpful, wants to be helpful, to utilize your skills and your relationships. And that's how SPJ will be successful.
Lucas, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I do want to move to item 8. Patty, you're up again. And this is just to give a little background. Couple of months ago, through the SPJ Foundation Board, we had a conversation about looking at our strategic pillars, to seeing if there was space for us to update, to alter, to potentially throw them out altogether and reimagine. And so Patty was the chair of that task force. And so she's going to briefly give an overview of what that task force found through its work. Patty, go ahead.
Thanks very much. So, back in the year that I was president, we completed a strategic plan and we put it on paper. And, we defined the 4 pillars of SPJ, in one succinct document. And the idea was that the board would revisit that document and those established, you know, what do we stand for statements. The board would revisit every year. Determine if anything needed tweaking, are these still legitimate, do we need to massage them, et cetera. And like many such plans, it really did not get utilized. It got put in the drawer. Nice work, everyone, right? And then we moved on. And of course, there's been a lot of turmoil in SPJ in the intervening years. And so we took a look at the language of the pillars. And essentially, we believe that the pillars still stand, that the things that SPJ defined, a mere 5 years ago are still the things that SPJ stands for, kind of big picture umbrella. It's really the online articulation of the pillars that needs cleaning up. And so this is an overly long memo. It's really so that it's a start that staff, we can continue to work with staff to clean up the language, to tighten up the language, to have more consistent and clear communication of the pillars, and sadly, to strip out a lot of things that no longer exist, right? So we referenced the original document, online articulation references a lot of things that we don't do anymore, that don't exist anymore, that we've extracted ourselves from, or for whatever reason, should no longer be linked. And, this is, of course, the nature of web life, right? That things just keep growing and growing, and then we never stop and kind of extract. So that's what this document is. Chris, you want to add anything as to our work? We met online 3 or 4 times. We talked it through. Each person on our committee looked at the pillars, and then, came along with, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the usual great idea, and then administrations change, and it's sitting there on the site, and we don't talk about it enough. And it's only a few years ago, and we all looked at it individually. We all took a pillar. I took the one about, the future of journalism, and there's slight tweaks, but we still need to preserve the idea of education and rallying the next generation. And what we realize, and these are like slight changes of words, it's not just the future of journalism. We need to create more journalists. It's the future of who's the next generation of journalists. So there's word changes, cleaning up things that don't exist anymore. And that was the easy part. The hard part is then saying, we just need to use this as part of our internal and probably external marketing campaign to say, this is who we are. How many times have we all said in these types of meetings, what is SPJ? What is the purpose? What's the focus? We're even in the fundraising and development discussion, what are those specific things that we can rally behind? I believe they're actually layered in the story behind these pillars. If we can figure out what those specific ingredients are that we would like to raise for, each pillar has something. But we need to talk about the pillars. We need to make them present. We need to put them as part of the agenda items and everything from national, actually on down to the chapters. We got a lot of buy-in and support for other people to look at these. And I went to some of the folks in Region 1 where I'm from and know all the leaders there. And I said, just give me your honest opinion. And everyone's pretty much on the same page. We wouldn't change those pillars. We would only adapt and evolve them because they're only a few years old. And there was a lot of work that went into it prior to us ever looking at it, including from you and Matt Hall. We want to make sure that work doesn't get lost or forgotten. So it's how do we build that into where is it on the homepage? How do we put that on social? You talk about social and engagement. Maybe there's specific graphics we have to keep pounding once a week on LinkedIn. There's things to do. So it was good to sit back, take a week in between or a month in between each conversation and internalize it and move to a point of let's just try to get it out there again. So.
And I would hope it'd be helpful in the fundraising realm,
Yeah.
right? Where is there one place I can point a potential funder? Oh, right here, this is who we are. And can we all be, emissaries for the cause? Language, it's really, again, agreeing that the pillars are the pillars that we want, right? Cleaning up the website and then just utilizing, like where does it live on the website? How often are we called upon to recite the pillars, to put the pillars front and center?
A lot of people always talk about ONA, they have a specific mission. Yeah, we know, that's the acronym online. We are a society standing for something that is more broad in nature. So I don't think we could ever be the Society of Professional Journalists for, multimedia. We are something that has to reach these pillars. So we, and just a few of us say, let's keep the pillars, evolve them, but just make them more present in the lives of every member and hopefully future member, because that's what this is all about.
Ernest, I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in because I know that you worked on this as well.
Yes, pretty much we updated, I think it was over DEI, like diversity and ethics. And there were some, I mean, for me, it was aspects of things, but it also kind of raised questions for me on was certain jobs being carried out by the section? So like what the website section, the pillar said, and the people who executed those positions, were they doing that? And so that created new questions for me, just out of curiosity of like, we were promoting this on the website, we're saying these roles, these jobs, but are people doing that work that's being described to members of the public at large? And so that was something that kind of made me think about, even when tweaking it, it was almost kind of difficult slightly, because it was like, well, as we tweak this and update this, are these particular roles in these jobs matching what we're tweaking and biasing? There's certain sections that have broad vision, where it's not necessarily a job like the staff upholds. Or for my particular section, one of my things that I kind of struggle with is like, as I'm tweaking this and modernizing it, is it living to particular role of director in that role? And that was something that, I thought about in the process.
I did want to say this. One, thank you all so much for your work, because I think, it's always, oh my goodness. It's always good to revisit and remind yourself about the why of what we're doing. And I'll say this, I was a chapter leader for many years and did not even know we had these strategic pillars until I went to Future Leaders Academy. And I remember sitting there and being like, I'm sorry, where are we sharing this with everybody? Why is this not something that is always forward facing? Why do I have to search for this and dig for it on the website? Why isn't this the first thing I see when I go to the website? Because if this is who we are and this is our why, then we should be shouting this from the rooftops. And I think we need to do a better job of articulating who we are, what we stand for, and why we're important. And if we can't continue to do that on a regular basis and have that be embedded in the DNA of every single thing we do, every project, every initiative, when we're fundraising, when we're doing events, well, then that's going to get lost. And people aren't going to understand why we need it. And they're not going to support us with their membership, with their funding, with anything, right? And I think we are in a moment right now that calls for us to be so much more. We are in the fight for the democracy. We have to step up and we have to make sure that people are very clear what our why is, right? And why we're important and why we're needed. So, I think that this work is really important to make sure that we are fine tuning all of these things. I also want to bring up too, as we bring in a new executive director, part of their task too is going to be to audit this too. And to say, okay, wait a minute, are we trying to be all things to all people? Or do we need to really narrow and focus?
Yeah.
And figure out what our lane is and stick to that lane, right? We cannot be all things to all people.
That was a very important impetus behind the creation of the pillars, because we reached a point where we were just throwing so many programs out there and then not having the sufficient follow through to make them signature programs, adding, never extracting. And that's why we have this messy, ending document here. So, yes, as we go and ask donors to get behind specific things, does it exist right now? Do we want to add this to our portfolio? And if so, does it fit into one of the pillars, right? Should we add something that somebody else is already doing and owning, right? Those are the kinds of things that every board should be asking. Like, that's a great idea, folks from Albuquerque, right? But boy, there's already, 3 groups that do that. And that doesn't really fit into our core mission under our 4 pillars. So, maybe if we tweak it this way, it would, et cetera, et cetera. So, who are we? Who aren't we?
Yes,
Kind of the
yes.
two
And then
sides.
what are we doing that's sustainable, right?
Say what?
What are we doing that's sustainable,
Yeah, exactly.
right? I think we have to be careful about consistently doing one-off things, right? Because that's when we become the all things to all people, and that's just, it's not sustainable.
Right.
So yes, I just wanted to say that, and again, thank you for your work, and I think as the new executive director comes in, I think having that person be able to sit down with your task force and kind of go through the timeline and the work that you all have done. So as they are kind of auditing what we do, where we've been and where we need to go, I think this is going to be a critical piece of information that's going to help that
Appreciate
person.
that opportunity
Yes.
to do a follow-up.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
I want to offer, a little bit of a perspective from outside of SPJ. I've had the opportunity to speak with leadership in other journalism organizations, over the last couple of months. I'm not going to mention them because I didn't have their permission to, to quote them, but it was interesting to me as the conversation evolved in three different incidents. And I talked to three different people from three different organizations, and I asked them the same question. And the response was almost identical. What do you think of when you think of SPJ? And I was told, this is what in the journalism community, this is what SPJ said. You are the guardians of First Amendment. You are the protectors of the free press, and you do ethics well. Nobody does it like SPJ. That's your history. That's your tradition, right? But we don't see that happening in SPJ like it used to. Okay. Now, one organization said, we made an executive decision by the board years ago that we weren't going to compete with SPJ in this. And we're going to focus on training. And that's what we do. And when we issue press releases or statements about things that affect First Amendment rights, this organization never does, because they said they made a decision that that's not their lane. That's SPJ's lane. And I thought it was interesting that having that conversation with three different leadership positions at different organizations, they all said, these are our pillars. SPJ is abdicating those a little at a time over the years. And even the ones that do sort of the press freedom things, they're pulling in their ranks a little bit. So their suggestion was, you need to get back to what you do best, and you need to own that space. And I think that's exactly what we've heard here today. So that's just a perspective from leadership and other organizations as they look into SPJ and say, what's going on? This is what we need. And they said, we need SPJ more than ever right now to take those positions against protecting, the assault against the free press in this country. So.
Any other board members with questions or comments?
That's just great feedback. It's like good to hear, because sometimes not sometimes, we have lost sight of those core principles, but they're right in front of us.
Yeah.
And they have been for 100 years. So let's keep doubling down and getting back to the basics, basically. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to own who we are.
All right, I would like to move to the public comment period. I would remind everyone that each person will have 2 minutes. And I will be timing because I forgot to ask somebody else to time, so I will be. Go ahead, Ernest.
Okay, quick, I have two main things. With the Google grant, I'm just curious that if there was also some sort, because it wasn't a proposal, if there was a proposal or not, I'm just curious about the implementation of that and how that could play a role. The big thing I want to also add before I get into my major one is that, with these pillars, I just hope that staff and people in charge of them reflect that, because I have heard independently from people, members, whatnot, that certain things that we're describing on our website are not matching the services being provided by people who are supposed to be a part of that. And then my big thing is regarding the foundation breakdown and things. I guess the biggest point for me is that if there is this issue around funds for SPJ and doing operational, then I'm just concerned about, I just personally don't know if that mission funding money should be going to the foundation. I think that was the bigger question that I was wondering throughout that discussion was about. I just feel like if there's an issue here, the mission fund should really just support SPJ separately, not the foundation, if there's restrictions from the foundation. And then I guess the other thing for me as well is that I think there's this big conversation about the foundation, what SPJ do. My interpretation is working in other nonprofits and foundations is foundations are to support programs to uphold and whatever, right? The reason why we do support and give money to SPJ in many ways is to help execute that and to carry out those things. So there's never gonna be a world where we just fund a project and don't expect SPJ to do it because their staff is people in charge. I would argue that in many ways there could be some creativity around it. Like if you have certain people doing the job, well, can't do that if I don't have lights on because I can't do the job without lights. I mean, as someone who has my own, LLC, we know how to do write-offs. I just think there's just a better way to communicate that and articulate that up front so that we don't keep bumping into these types of trouble. And it just requires maybe SPJ to say, hey, this is how our staff works. This is what we need on project so people know why and justify the cost. But I don't think it's that as hard as they come across. We just have to be more creative.
Thank you for that. And I want to add too, I handle a bulk of grants in my current role at my institution. And a lot of times we will write staff salaries into the grants. And so literally, we know that it's a grant and that we're gonna have it for a year and a half or 2 years. We will write in the salary of, an employee, and that salary will be covered for 2 years under the grant. So, those are the things that we can also be thinking.
Written by grants, correct?
I'm sorry?
There has been.
There has been in the past. Yes, there has been in the past. Not currently. We
Yeah.
currently don't have any grant funded positions, but those are some of the things that we should probably consider as we are going out to these things, because that can be things like kind of help keep the lights on, right? In a very roundabout way. We can be a bit creative on how we are drawing up the line item budgets for these grants and saying, look, in order for us to do this project, we have to write in the salary because this person is going to be needed in order to execute all of the outcomes that we've outlined in this foundation proposal. So,
And
yes,
everything you're saying has always been done.
Exactly.
So it's not new.
it's not new,
I
right?
mean.
We just haven't done it in a little while, right?
But that, I were executive directors and, have put reports together for as long as I've been around, that detail
Yeah.
all of these things.
Yep.
So it's not new.
Nope.
It just hasn't been done recently.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Any other public comment? Yes, Hazel.
Hi, I was heartened by the discussion of the strategic plan from that task force, and thank you guys. I think the fact that you came to, okay, what that guy did back then, it was good, okay? I think, I'm sorry for the undertones, but I don't want to get into things on that. But I think that an important thing in carrying out the task force report and moving forward is seeing to it that constituencies within SPJ are involved in parts of it that affect them. And of course, I'm just going to give the big example of the 500 of us who are in the freelance community, 500 plus of us who are in the freelance community, which may be bigger than any chapter, I'm not sure, but we're nationwide. So as a matter of fact, I think maybe we're worldwide too.
Yes, Kazakhstan is.
Well, and Paris, and I mean, I know where our members are from. I've seen the roster and analyzed it. But I think things like seeing to it that communities that are very active feel valued and welcomed, and bringing us back into the way things are done at SPJ. And I have to say, I was so heartened last night to see some integration between the SPJ board and the foundation people and the other people who were in the room last night when we, particularly when we had drinks, to see that, all right, so let me just make it short.
Yeah.
I just want to hand it to Hagit and Ashanti for bringing us back together again. Thank you, guys, because I do feel like when we really rewrite all the bullet points for the pillars, somebody's going to come to the freelance community and say, what do you guys wanted to say?
Absolutely.
And I'll just give one more aside. All right, so I know there would not be a freelance fund today if SPJ had been paying attention to freelancers, and now we have a freelance fund is getting replenished at least a little bit, and not all by me or us. Let's keep bringing constituencies back together and all be working together, because Kevin spoke with leaders of organizations, and I speak a lot to the little guys down here. And that, they don't say, oh, that's what I see in SPJ. What a lot of the people down here say is, I see a lot of dysfunction. Well, let's make sure that the world knows out there that the dysfunction is in the past and we're ready to move forward together.
Absolutely. I do underscore your point of, there was just 4 of us that worked hard. There are hundreds of others. We do need to get their perspective on what would you put into this pillar? And on top of also the new executive director, maybe they have a different pillar, maybe they would adjust. So there are like probably 2 follow-up steps before we start marketing this thing in earnest. Everybody's opinion does matter because it is the organization that serves the members, so the members should have a say in the pillars. But this is a good step, and you're right, we need everyone's voice. Even when I'm talking about it, I'm like, well, there's only 4 of us. Yes, we got some outside opinion, but I almost feel uncomfortable saying this is it, because it's not it. It's just a good second step. The first step was actually making this thing real a few years ago. But yeah, it's all, and I agree. I think the fact that we're all collegial and everyone seems to be getting along and the communication is as good as I've seen it, we're headed in the right direction, even with the, the headwinds that we're currently still facing, so.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Any other public comments from anyone? Yes, Patty.
I have a couple of questions. Responding to Jennifer talking about, membership, and you noted that some folks were saying they didn't get anything, so they didn't know they'd lapsed. I just want to get a refresher on how we communicate to people that they've lapsed. I signed on recently to the site and I had lapsed. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. I probably missed something, an email or something. So what is our usual method for pinging people, telling them to pay?
In a perfect world, people get a notification a couple months before they lapse, then they get another one a month out, and then you get another one saying, you need to renew now. And that is usually an email, and I would say in the last 3 or 4 years, it has become predominantly, and sometimes only through email, but Crystal's working to get paper mailings back out to people as well, at least one of those times at one of those touch points, because we still do have quite a few members who want things in the mail. So, and I think that is where she's seeing the most growth and people coming back, especially this last time around, is from the mailings that went out. So.
Thanks. I have a second question.
And may I follow up on that real quick, if you remind?
Yeah.
I had the same situation a year or so ago where I discovered I had been lapsed for a good number of months. Crystal had helped me work through that. I never got any notification, email or regular mail at the time. Here a few weeks ago, I got a email that my credit card had been charged for renewal. That was the only notification I got. So whatever she's working on, it's still not working.
Yeah, there was a glitch with credit cards.
I mean, I was fine with it being renewed. I went back to make sure it had been a year, and it had actually been more than a year. So,
Okay.
but it wasn't the best way to notify a member that.
Right.
that they were paying.
Yeah, some people got notifications who shouldn't have, and she was able to catch it before most people's cards got charged. But she was on the phone a better part of the day with the people who did get charged, and were like, what is this? And she reversed some charges for some people, so yeah.
Patty, your second question?
Yeah, my second question has to do with our continuing conversation about funding options. When you go to SPJ, you go to the donate tab, it takes you to a page, it gives you some choices. Hit the next donate, and it takes you to a page that's only to contribute via the foundation. And so, again, this was a conversation that needs a lot more time, but if we are fundraising against the need for just general operational funds, you know, save SPJ, a little indirect, but help SPJ, whatever, right? Could there be an option on the donate page that takes you to, that has language about operational support?
The mission.
And it doesn't go, the main page does tell you that, you can support SPJ in 3 different ways. The foundation, legal defense fund, with a notation that says this is not tax deductible. First Amendment fund, also not tax deductible. But one of the tabs takes you just directly to the foundation. So could there be language on this page that gets to our desire to have some dollars flow specifically and directly for operational use? Just putting that in there. That's all I wanted to ask. Thank you.
You can briefly.
Yeah, I was, of course, I will say on the giving page, which is the Network for Good, you'll see that we did put it as the first, only because, again, a lot of donors want tax deductions. And so before, the first thing they got in front of a hit donate, it was not taxable, not taxable, not taxable. Who goes to the page, like, I want to make a donation now? And so we try to prioritize it up top. When you go to that page, you will see, we did adjust it, and we're still kind of talking about it a bit too, but it does say area of greatest need, or it does not require a restriction. So I will tell you, 90% of people do not put a restriction on it. They just give to give. And because most of the gifts are, 1,000 down, most of the ones that you're getting the participation online. But yeah, definitely we'll look at the page again. Be more clear.
It's the design of the webpage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, gotcha.
Yes, Kevin.
So, Louis, I have a question about that. I don't know obviously what everyone's financial situation is, but post 2017, after the great tax rewrite, there are a lot of people who just don't make that threshold to itemize. So it doesn't matter if I give to the foundation or I give to SPJ directly, because I can't write it off. Is there some way that we can, I don't know, is there some way we can message that?
I confront that a lot because, it's true. Like someone giving $50, it's really not gonna move the needle on their taxes if they're not giving a bunch more gifts. But I will tell you psychologically, I have people write saying, hey, can I get my tax deduction for my $25 I gave? I want my taxes. I need this urgently. And I'm like, but really? So yeah, I agree with you. And I think you can always mention that, but I will say most people are just conditioned to that idea of getting that tax receipt. And so when they don't, it's, they're like, oh, maybe it wasn't worth it. Even though when it comes time for tax season, most likely a lot of folks are not actually taking the deduction. But they still might enter it like in their TurboTax with their taxes. It does nothing.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Any other public comment before we wrap that section up?
Just a great job by all the regional coordinators doing the regional conferences, and a lot of work goes into it, so it should be a fun month or so, conferences, and we appreciate their work.
Yeah, I second that. We have monthly touch base meetings with the regional coordinators. And so, hearing all of the work that they put into these regional conferences, and, I, as a former president of a chapter who had to plan a regional conference, it is a lot, especially when you are not being paid to do it. So, just sending out a huge thank you to all of them, because the programming that I've seen come through has looked absolutely top notch. And I think all of the regional conferences that are coming up are definitely going to be worth the time, the effort, and the money being spent by members and non-members to attend. So again, I implore you, if you have time and you're in any of those regions that I mentioned during my president's report, it's also on the SPJ website. Please, please, please register, attend, spend your money, spend your time. I think it's going to be well worth it. So thank you. Any other public comment before we wrap that section up? Okay, I would like to entertain a motion to enter executive session so that we can take up the conversation of the SPJ Executive Director as suggested by the SPJ Executive Director Search Committee. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries. You will now adjourn to executive session. Thank you so much, everyone. We will notify you when we come back to the main session.
Ashanti, should I stay?
Yeah.
Hang outside and have some.
Exactly, there's plenty of food.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
I love free hair. Oh, it's so recording.
Yeah, maybe parliamentary hassles evolve.
Awesome, thank you so much, Fred.
Oh,
Well, hopefully we will wrap this up and then you can be free and clear. All right, that's your game.
For those of you who are not a board member, you could please exit Zoom, that would be.
Make sure that no one knows that Reggie did attend. Yeah, so, I said her, I did not do it.
Okay, so now.
Dawn, you can exit Zoom as well. And.
I need to go to the restroom.
Well, I'm. Anyway.
All right, so you're done with me for the day, Jennifer?
Yes, I can pick up, so they come back.
Okay.
All good.
All right, I will see you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know how I. By 11 a.m. If you want to be ready.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I apologize. I don't kidding. No, I got it back. I was like, oh,
It was like, it's not.
I've never been like this. I'm sorry if I'm not hitting.
Is it supposed to be still recording?
Oh, no, I'll stop recording.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me stop just a second.
Let me know when you're gonna convene.
So we're free to-
You are free.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, no, it's not recording.
Okay, well, what is it?
It's a big deal. It's a big, moment.
Congratulations. And thanks for leading that.
Absolutely.
That's a big-
And it's like, only really April. Only got lots to accomplish the rest of the year, right? Out of the way,
Out of the
we
way.
can do some more good stuff.
Yes, yes, yes.
Maybe she can take some.
Right.
You think I've been cheering.
Oh, did you?
I realized that when I was doing it, like, right, there's people outside. I'm a very expressive person. You know, I've been quiet in the meetings.
Good. Getting excited.
Just love a vote.
Right.
Yes, voting. Yes, Robert's Rules of Order.
My bread and butter.
I didn't see you drink a whole lot.
No, I didn't.
Okay. All right, welcoming everyone back to our regular session outside of our executive session. Would like to now just say that, we did take a vote in executive session. That information that came out of that will hopefully be shared with everyone within the next week or so. So please keep an eye out for that. And with that, can I entertain a motion for adjournment?
Motion.
Can I get a second?
You're not gonna tell us.
No, I'm not. Second. All those in favor? Aye. All right, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful Saturday. Good work to the board.
Hi, guys.
Bye. Bye.